Hi, my name is Skylar Boshin. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be discussing my childhood sexual abuse story. It's a heavy subject, but I want to talk about it today because I know that sharing your own story can help other survivors feel more empowered to share their own and more empowered to go forward and heal. My abuse began when I was 3 years old, and my abuse was perpetrated by my grandmother and her now ex-boyfriend. I was abused from age 3 to age 11. Sexual abuse is a really big taboo in our society, which is extremely unfortunate because it makes it easier for people to perpetrate this crime. My childhood sexual abuse began with tickling. Tickling was a very easy thing for my perpetrator to start with because this was a trusted person in our family. I viewed this person as my grandfather because my biological grandfather died before I was born. So this person had been in my life since I was 0, and to me, he was grandpa, and that made my abuse that much harder. A lot of the time, sadly, sexual abuse is perpetrated by a family member or a family friend, or someone that is very close or known to the family. Very few times is child sexual abuse perpetrated by a stranger. That is a very rare occurrence that happens. However, that is usually what gets put on the news because of how uncommon it is. After tickling, my perpetrator began to lift my shirt up and tickle underneath, touch my breasts. I use the word perpetrator because that is what is comfortable to me. I have not talked to my perpetrator since I was 8 years old. My abuse from him stopped when I was 8, when my grandmother and him broke up, and my abuse continued from my grandmother until I was 11. Neither of them received any sentence or punishment. However, I did go forward and give a forensic interview when I was 16 years old after I had disclosed to my parents. Once we had a police report made, I moved to Kansas City, Missouri when I was 11, which is how the abuse ended. And once I lived in Kansas City, Missouri, I had to start continuing my life as normal and pretend that that part of my life didn't exist, because acknowledging that part of my life was way too hard. It was just too difficult because it was so painful. And as a result of that, I repressed all of those memories of the abuse, meaning I pushed them to the back of my memory, pretended that they didn't exist, and I did that to the point where I even forgot about my perpetrator existing. When I was 15 years old, I experienced sextortion, which I made a video on, and I will link that right here. And I highly recommend watching that video, especially if you don't know what sextortion is. I also have a video about how to prevent sextortion and what it is. When I was 15 years old, I watched the movie entitled Room. This movie is about a woman who is abducted and ends up having a child while she is held in captivity and is sexually assaulted during her time in captivity. While I watched this movie with my family, I began to have flashbacks of my childhood sexual abuse. And that is when I started getting all of these repressed memories come back to the forefront of my mind. And that changed the entire trajectory of my life. Because now this wasn't something secret in the back of my head. Now this was very much present. By then, my sextortion had already began. I ended up sharing with my parents about the sexual abuse that I experienced as a child, which was a very difficult thing to do. When I disclosed to them, I was very emotional. I ended up going to therapy afterwards and was able to talk to a clinical therapist about my experience. However, I ended up having a therapist who was not very helpful and ended up re-traumatizing me because she was not convinced that what I experienced was abuse, because as a child, as a 15-year-old, I didn't want to talk about all of the little nitty-gritty details of the disturbing things that happened to me. So I would talk about the tickling, and I would talk about the physical abuse of being hit and thrown and all of these other things. But I didn't go into the extent of the sexual abuse because that was too terrifying to share with someone. So I felt very misheard, and I didn't feel believed by my therapist. And as a result of that, it took me another year before I would go forward and report my child sexual abuse to an organization called MOXA, which stands for the Metropolitan Organization to Counter Sexual Assault. MOXA became a huge part of my life. After that, I began group therapy and individual therapy at MOXA, and it was extremely helpful. This is an organization in Kansas City, Missouri, and it helps the Kansas City metropolitan area in a lot of different ways. And I was lucky enough to receive their services and begin my healing process. I reported, got my forensic interview done, and talked to the detective assigned to my case. Unfortunately, there was just not enough evidence because at this point so much time had passed. I didn't want to go through a lengthy court process because I was already going through another court case that involved the sextortion that I experienced. At that time in my life, I was also very much not wanting to be in the same room as my perpetrator. I did not want to see him or be anywhere near him or talk to him or anything like that. While I had forgiven him at that point, but forgiving for myself so that I can move forward, I was just not ready to face him, and I did not believe that I would get any justice through the criminal justice system because that's what I was also being told, which I don't disagree with, unfortunately. My grandmother did not get any punishment or anything like that because at this time she had Alzheimer's and dementia and was already in a nursing home. So she could not give an interview or anything like that. My request to the detective was to go to my perpetrator's residence and inform his children and his new wife about my allegations, because at that point they were just allegations because there were never any there was never a court case or anything like that came out of my police report. I want to also say I was not the only person who experienced this abuse. However, at the time, none of my family members who also experienced the abuse wanted to come forward. The police went to my perpetrator's house and conducted a police interview and also talked to his family members, letting them know about the allegations that I had made to ensure that they had that information and could remain safe after knowing all of that. Because my biggest concern was that all these years of not telling had created more victims, and that was the last thing that I wanted. So that was a very important thing for me to have the detective on my case do. And luckily I had a really amazing detective who supported me throughout the case and was able to go and talk to the family members of my perpetrator. Some people won't understand why I have been able to forgive and move forward. However, that is personally how I have dealt with this situation, with my abuse, with everything that I've gone through, because I don't want him to take another second of my life. And I take those words from Elizabeth Smart. She is a victim advocate and speaker and survivor. For me, listening to other people share their stories was incredibly helpful and made me feel less alone and helped me heal. Since my child sexual abuse, I've been able to talk to family members about what I experienced, and I've been able to move forward and become an advocate. And through Moxa, I was able to become a victim advocate, where I would travel to different hospitals on call and support survivors through their SANE exam, sexual assault nursing examination, which was very therapeutic. And I also got to then go to different high schools and colleges to give speeches on my personal story of childhood sexual abuse and my other stories of sextortion and college rape. As a survivor, I want to let all other survivors know who are listening to my story that there is no right or wrong way to heal. There's no right or wrong way to move forward from abuse. And I believe you, and you will make it through this, and you will move forward, and you will persevere, and you are incredibly strong. I will be releasing a memoir that is to come. No dates have been released or anything like that, but I am in the editing process. I do have a manuscript, and I'm very excited for that next chapter of my life to become a published author. In my memoir, there will be more details of the child sexual abuse that I experienced, and I hope that my story can give people an understanding that childhood sexual abuse happens right in front of everyone, oftentimes. No one knew that it was happening to me, but it would happen in the same house while my family members were walking around, but no one knew because it was very disguised, and he was very manipulative, and it was just tickling. It was just that we were playing a game, this or that, and that is often how perpetrators are able to commit these horrendous crimes. And so it's extremely important for parents to understand that and inform their children. So please go watch my video about how to educate children on sexual abuse and why you should educate children on sexual abuse. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and definitely go check out my website and my newsletters. Bye.